Thank you so much for joining us. I think we'll get started now. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone joining us from around the country and around the world. This webinar series of ours attracts people from many, many countries across the world. My name is Keith Babich, and I serve as Vice President for Development at American Friends of the University of Haifa. It's truly a pleasure to welcome you to today's special program, Inside Israel's Evolving Security Landscape, an insider briefing with the former deputy head of the Mossad. As many of us know, Israel's security environment is shifting rapidly. It's shaped by regional developments and intelligence activities that rarely come into public view. Today's program offers something unique, a chance to hear from someone who has spent decades at the heart of Israel's most sensitive strategic decisions. As many of you know, the program description, Udi Lavi served as deputy head of the Mossad and previously as chief of special operations, playing a central role in some of Israel's most sophisticated intelligence achievements, including operations targeting Iranian infrastructure and the disruption of Hezbollah's communications network. His experience gives him a perspective that few others can offer. Reflecting the University of Haifa's deep expertise in national security and regional affairs, this program offers a unique opportunity to hear directly from one of Israel's most experienced intelligence leaders. The university is home to some of Israel's most respected scholars in fields like security studies, international relations, and the complexities of the Middle East, making conversations like this a very natural extension of our academic mission. But the university's role extends well beyond the classroom. As the leading institution in northern Israel, the University of Haifa plays an important part in strengthening communities across the region, helping reserve soldiers return to their studies, supporting first-generation students, and nurturing the diverse fabric of Israeli society, Jewish, Arab, Druze, Christian, and international students all learn side by side, demonstrating that shared society is both powerful and possible. This work is more important than ever. Your support fuels opportunity, resilience, and stability at a moment when Israel's social and economic fabric is being tested. Whether enabling student scholarships, advancing research, or expanding community programs in the North, your partnership helps shape the next generation of leaders, thinkers, and innovators. If you feel inspired by today's program, we invite you to support the university's mission by visiting afuh.org/donate. Before we begin, a quick housekeeping note. We'll leave time at the end of the conversation for audience questions. Please send your questions at any point using the Q&A box on Zoom. And now it's my pleasure to turn things over to Dubi Weissglass, Chair of the Executive Committee of the University of Haifa and former Director General of the Prime Minister's Office under Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, who will lead today's conversation with Udi. Dubi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Keith, and thank you everybody for joining us tonight. We are very, very privileged, I would say, to host Udi Lavi. By the way, this is how you pronounce his name, and very rightly. Udi definitely deserved the name, because Lavi, as you know, means in Hebrew, a lion. And today, you will have the opportunity to meet a lion when it comes to our defenses. By the way, as part of Udi's long, eventful career, whether with the military and later on with the Mossad, he also a recipient of Israel's Security Award, which is the highest award granted by the State of Israel for individuals or groups for their exceptionally contribution for the security of the State of Israel. So thank you, Udi, for being with us tonight, and thank you for joining with us your career, your knowledge, and your expertise on this issue. So maybe really the right beginning would be if you will just tell us about yourself.
First of all, good evening to everybody, all those who join us. I must say, for me, it's a big honor and big pleasure. And Dubi, as always, is exaggerating a little bit. We'll discuss the lion issue later on. I'll talk a little bit about my background because I think it will be good in order to understand later on what I'm talking about or what I'm referring to. So I'll talk about my military background, which was only 5 years, and I served as the last position as a platoon commander at the Lebanon 1982 war. Probably there are here some of our audience that were not born there yesterday, but for us, Lebanon was not beginning in this year with Hezbollah. So 1982, I was a platoon commander in Beirut. Later on, I left the army and went to the office, to the Mossad, what we call the office, and spent there around 37 years doing everything, almost everything. My beginning of career was a case officer, in general, recruiting agents. I mean, I was not dealing with special ops and things like that, bad things like that. I was dealing with recruiting Syrian, Palestinian, Iranian, and so on in order to make them friends of our office. And then the previous position, or the first or the last position before becoming deputy director of Mossad, I was head of operations and was involved in many interesting different operations. Last position, I spent 3 years as the deputy director of Mossad and head of operation, in which I always say after Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu demand us or ask us to present the archive operations. So I'm always proud to say I was then the head of operations, and for me the archive was one of the jewelries I'm happy to present. Anyway, later on at the end of 2020, I left the Mossad after not being nominated by Bibi to be the head of the Mossad. I left the Mossad, went to business. I'm very much involved today in defense tech, in both low tech and high tech, running a group of industrial companies producing parts for the Aero system, the Iron Dome system, all kinds of radars involved in the system you see now during the Haravot Barzel war and all over Europe today. Except for that, I'm a GP in a defense tech VC, now being established in the last 6 months, part of the flourishing VC in this business. And we are dealing with encouraging new technologies, defense technologies in Israel and out of Israel. So this is for the start. Dubi.
Thank you very much, Udi. Once you mentioned the archive operation, maybe in favor of our audience who are not that familiar with the details, will you kindly just elaborate a little bit about what it meant, what it happened, what it was?
Yeah, I'll be delighted. 2018, we were asked, or it was 2017, we were asked to tackle the issue of the nuclear archive, Iranian archive, known for us, or known to the intelligence services based in Iran, in Tehran, somewhere near in the suburbs of Tehran. And it was part of our efforts to prove or to try and bring the hard evidence for the world, and not for the Americans, but for the other, mainly the European main countries, there's Germany, France, England, to convince them that the Iranians are not just talking about nuclear issues, they are really really advancing in that business, and not just enriching uranium, but also dealing with the weapon itself, the nuclear weapon itself, apparatus. So we wanted that operation in order to uncover that treasure, that archive. And is if you go to the Pentagon and you break in, you bring the archive, or you go to the Kiria in Tel Aviv, you bring the IDF archive. We went there to Tehran to bring the nuclear archive, and then the January 18, we brought it more than 100,000 documents and CDs and other materials. Everything brought to Israel in a very special way. And later on, it was part of our policy to expose it as much as we could. We said the ideology about exposing it was to use it to make a difference, to make a change, to convince those who are letting themselves believe the Iranian team that they are, or teasers, that they are doing it for civilian causes in order to produce energy. We want them to see it straightforward and to be convinced, or not to let them the possibility to let the Iranian cheat us. So what we brought from there was a very convincing proof that they were actually producing nuclear weapons. I remember sitting in the special ops headquarters, seeing the first documents coming from the mail, from the special mail, seeing these warheads or warhead description, a very detailed one. And even among us, there were those who were quite surprised to see the level that they reached that time. But there were two main issues that we could take from that. First of all, the fact that they were really producing a weapon and nothing else. They were producing a real nuclear weapon, much more sophisticated than the Hiroshima bomb. Second, and this was not pointed by the political levels in Israel by Bibi itself, that the Iranians stopped dealing with the nuclear weapon itself. And I'm not talking about enriching uranium, but the nuclear weapon itself. In 2003, probably after Saddam was killed by, or was after the invasion of the Americans to Iraq. We don't know exactly the reason for that, but they stopped dealing with it with an order from the leader, from the high supreme leader. And since 2003 till 2015, the JCPOA, when Barack Obama went to the JCPOA, they were not dealing with the weapon, only dealing with enriching uranium. We'll talk about it later on. Dubi, you wanted to?
Yeah. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I just wanted to emphasize that this part of my career was the one that I was very much involved. What I'm going to talk today is to try and describe the more wider perspective in order for all of us to understand how we got to this point that we are talking today after 2 years of war and so on and so on. So let's move on to the next question, and I'll be able to make progress.
Israel is having sort of a very vast and effective intelligence community. So for the understanding of our friends around the world, will you kindly describe the division of authorities and responsibilities amongst the various members of the various branches of the intelligence community Israel, Mossad, General Security Service, the military intelligence, etc. Just give us the big picture, how this community operates.
Yeah, I'll give it to you, but I must say that the division of responsibility is different when you do it. When you do it 5 years ago, we were fighting for every piece of responsibility we could take. The Shabak wanted to do work abroad, Shabak, Shin Bet, and the military intelligence wanted to be everywhere, and Mossad wanted to work in Gaza, and so on and so on. I'm not sure this will be the situation when the inquiry committee will be established. Then the issue of responsibility will be divided in a different way. I can imagine. But generally speaking, in Israel, the division between the responsibilities is as following. As for Iran, Mossad and the military intelligence are responsible to gather information and to operate them. Means the Mossad and the army, IDF. As for Hezbollah, Lebanon, Syria, Mossad and the military intelligence are responsible for gathering information and doing all kinds of other activities, as you have seen this war, especially in Beirut. As for Hamas and Gaza, the responsibility is responsibility of Shin Bet and the military intelligence. Mossad is involved in dealing with Hamas all over the world, Indonesia, North Africa, Beirut, Istanbul, and so on, but not in Gaza, really. And this division was, I think Dubi was made, I think, even before your time as general manager of the office. I think it was the Meridor committee was dividing these front lines between the organization, but it will probably be discussed in the inquiry committee that will, inshallah, be established in the soon. Sooner the better.
In our generation. It's commonly known that the Mossad is responsible, very sort of generally speaking, in operating overseas, and the what you call the Shabak, the General Security Service, its responsibility is mainly inside Israel in security matters and in the Palestinian areas. The IDF intelligence service is sort of on both. The reason I'm saying is that Arik Sharon always used to say that an operation was brought to his consideration or to his approval. So if it was operation inside, let's say, Palestinian areas, so normally the IDF was totally against because they had to perform it. The Mossad was enthusiastically supported because they had nothing to do with it. And the General Security Service was sort of in the middle. If the same kind or the same category of operation would be discussed or would be planned, let's say, in Damascus or in Lebanon, which is the Mossad responsibility, so the way it was is the Mossad is strongly against because they had to do it. The General Security Service is, again, enthusiastically supported because they got nothing to do with it. And the military was sort of in between. Okay, so this the Israeli intelligence community, all along the history of State of Israel, knew some terrible failures, and yet next to a very splendid successes, we come to October 7. What's your view about how from a catastrophic failure of October 7th, it ended with such a spectacular victory against Hezbollah, against Hamas, and against Iran? How this the crossing from those two polarities happened? And what's your perspective about it from the political, from the military, from the operational, and from the intelligent aspect of this very almost unbelievable change from down up?
Yeah. First of all, I have to emphasize that I'm not a military guy. I spent 37 years in the intelligence, although we were very much engaged with the army and with other kinds of units in the Israeli intelligence committee. But I'm not an expert in military operations, so everything I say is my impression as a high-rank intelligence of it. Second, I see the beginning of a different attitude to how you deal with your responsibility, whether it is Hezbollah or Iran. And I see the difference between the way we saw Hezbollah in Iran and those who were responsible for Gaza in the very beginning of our attitude to our role with or our responsibilities in dealing with these fronts. I remember 2002 when General Dagan, Meir Dagan, first came to the Mossad, took responsibility as head of Mossad, came from the army, and he said, we are no longer just responsible to know what is happening, but from now on, we are responsible to know and then to do something about it, and then to change the reality. We are responsible. We have a kind of a comprehensive responsibility. And if we deal with Hezbollah, it's not enough that we'll know that they are building a huge scale rocket, let's say, forces. Or if we are dealing with Iran, it's not enough to understand exactly where are all the ballistic missiles or the other kind of UAVs and the atomic constellations. We have to do something about it. It's not enough to know. You have to act in order to change it. This was the beginning of a real new state of mind in the Mossad. And when we see what happened many years later during the war with the beepers and other surprises that we were preparing there for years, it's a result of this kind of different or new way of thinking in these organizations. All the way we were seeing Hezbollah, for example, was an offensive way. We didn't see it as something that we have to make or prepare an alert so someone else will have to deal with it in case we happen to understand that something is happening. We prepared so many things since the beginning of the war, since the war in 2006 in Lebanon. So we were in a completely different situation in October 7, 23. So this is kind of, let's say, this is kind of an opening in order to understand how it happens to us. When you take this October 7 failure, and it was a real failure, I divide it into three main reasons. And I'm, again, emphasizing, I'm not an inquiry committee. I'm not an expert in everything connected to these huge failures, but I want to mention three main anchors for this failure. The first of all is an intelligence failure. It was a real catastrophe for the intelligence organization. The fact that we knew nothing in the hours before the attack, and what we knew, we didn't consider it a serious threat, and what we knew, we didn't connect it to the plans we brought or the Israeli NSA brought 2 years before. The whole plan of the attack, we didn't connect it to the attack. And finally, it's 6:29 in the morning. Israel was completely surprised. So it was an intelligence failure. I might say it was the first reason for this failure was the wrong conception. I mean, it's an old world that we were discussing after 73 failure. I think there were many other historic experiences of such a conception that was brought the best intelligence organization in the world to make such a wrong estimation or such a terrible catastrophe. But the first reason was a conception that we were convinced. I say we were, I'm talking about all the Israeli intelligence organization, that the Hamas is deterred. Hamas won't dare to attack on ground. He was preparing the underground capabilities several years before. And we were very sure that he won't dare to do something else, although it was written, although it was part of the plan, full plan, that was brought 2 years earlier. We couldn't believe something like that can happen. The second reason, which is more tactical, but it represents our difficulties with such an adversary as Hamas, or in general, all the jihadic organization, is to recruit sources in these organizations, to recruit these religious guys. Much more complicated than to recruit the old Syrian officers in the 70s, 80s, in London, in Paris, in Russia, and so on. To recruit these fanatic guys, it's a different challenge. It's not that we cannot deal with this challenge, but much more difficult and requires a lot of resources. And for the Shabak, probably, the fact that they could deal with other alternatives, mostly technological alternative, or use technological alternative, it was the easy way to go. They preferred, instead of recruiting these guys in the Gaza Strip, instead of recruiting 5, 10, 20 serious sources, human sources in the Gaza Strip that could alert us that morning, 2 hours, 3 hours, the evening before, say something is happening, something not ordinary is happening all along the front. Something like that didn't happen. We didn't have any real serious human source in Gaza. It was a big failure, and I can tell you that the Mossad, that was a specialist in recruiting guys, I'm not sure in the other fronts we are in a better situation. Okay? So for years, Israeli intelligence, Americans, Brits, Russians, we were all coping with this challenge of recruiting jihadist sources. And when it doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen enough, or it doesn't happen in a level that really can bring the knowledge from the topper decision makers, you reach positions or you reach events like the October 7th. The third reason that I see there, it was arrogance. We thought we are the best. Dubi marked the prize that I got 2006. We got a lot of prizes like that. A lot in the last year. We were doing operations that, the archive is not the most complicated of it. And we got a lot of, but when it comes to the basic work of recruiting sources in Gaza, in Iran, in Hezbollah, we are still challenging it, and not always with a big success. So you take the wrong conception, you take the lack of human sources, you take the arrogance or the feeling of most of us that we are the best, you get the October 7th. Probably there are many other reasons, but I don't want to go into it this evening. Second reason is the military. I said in the very beginning, I'm not a military guy. I spent 5 years in the military, but not a general, and not really the one who is capable of commenting about it. But I can talk about two major problems. The first one is that we have a small and smart army, very small comparing, or relatively small for the challenges we are dealing with. And in October 7th, we didn't have enough soldiers in the front. Part of them were in Jeddah and Samaria. Part of them were in the northern front. Most of them were at home in the holiday of Sukkot. And we didn't have enough power in Gaza, if we did have enough power, something that could never happen. Could never happen. And if we had a big enough army, we could leave there some more forces and then have enough forces at home. And I can tell you one thing, even today, after 2 years of war and after coping with this October 7 catastrophe, we don't have a big enough army. And when we talk about a big enough army, we need much more recruited soldiers. We cannot, I can give you an example from my son. My son spent 300 days in the first half and a year and a half of war, 300 days at Miluim. He is reserves. He is not a professional soldier. He is a commando soldier in one of the interesting units in the army. So he spent there 300 days and then he went back home and he was called to come for another 50 days and another 50 days. Something like that cannot continue forever. We need much more soldiers. We need a bigger army if we want to really cope with these challenges. The challenge is not just Gaza, it's the Hezbollah, it's the Houthis, the Yemenis, the Iranian, and so on. Second, we were in the mood on the conception of defensive methods. I mean, we were counting on the wall, our Maginot line that was built between Otef Aza, between the kibbutzim and moshavim in Gaza, and Hamas. There was a wall, underground wall, and on-ground, very interesting fence, very sophisticated fence. And I remember discussions in a very high level, whether they were political and military, counting on the wall, just counting the days that the wall will be there performing what we were expecting it to perform. And I can imagine, I left the organization around the beginning of 20, but I remember that we were celebrating the new wall, and probably the idea of we have a wall and we have a defensive barrier like that between us and the Palestinians, it's good enough. It's good enough. We were shocked to see that they broke the wall in 30 places simultaneously with... They were detonating it and killing it with D9s. Something that, of course, we could understand and learn in advance. So for the military, small and smart army, and then counting on this barrier was a big mistake. Then I come for the third stage, or the third real reason for this collapse or for this catastrophe is the political reason, political level. And I can put two main reasons the way I see it. First of all, not just political or politicians, is the fact that the Israelis, the political level, including Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, and the chief of staff, whether it's Eisenkot and Aviv Kochavi, we were all trying to avoid war or a real comprehensive war, a real war, 3 or 2 France war in every price, in any price. I mean, to avoid war in Gaza, to avoid war with Hezbollah, although we were seeing the build-up in both France and the build-up in Iran, but avoiding war or war aversion, what it's called, at all costs was the first big strategic mistake. I imagine that today we are in a different situation in that sense. The second problem was Hamas was considered as an asset. This is not just talks. This is thing that was affecting all the way we were dealing with Hamas. Hamas was taken as the last barrier, the existence of Hamas was taken as the last barrier between us and the Palestinian statehood challenge, let's say. We thought, I take it as we thought, but this was really political. This was really the political level to be blamed with. Where they considered Hamas, as long as it exists, as long as it challenged the Palestinian Authority, as long as you have two main entities, one in Gaza, one in Ramallah, you can never really discuss a Palestinian solution or any idea of Palestinian solution. As long as you have two addresses, one in Gaza, one in Ramallah, you can say always, look, there's no one to talk to. No one to talk to. And in that sense, there was a lot of efforts in order to maintain Hamas. I'm not sure, or let's say, I'm sure nobody wanted to get Hamas to the point of October 7. Nobody even believed that something like that can happen while you let him survive, letting him get the money, letting him get the channels of money, or maintain the channels of money. But the result was the fact that while maintaining Hamas, while keeping Hamas alive, in order to avoid any discussion about a Palestinian state, you got Hamas of October 7th. So these two reasons why the war aversion, the containment of every change in the Palestinian front, in the Hezbollah front, in Iran, in order to avoid war was the first reason. The second reason, keeping Hamas was a kind of an insurance not to discuss or not to be challenged by the Palestinian issues. So these were the main reasons why we reached October 7th. Of course, in order to understand really what happened, we need a real inquiry, and the real inquiry will be like something that happened after the 73 war, like something that happened after the second Lebanon war, and so on. So after the first Lebanon war, the Dubi was involved in part of it. By the way, I remember when I was a captain, a platoon commander in Beirut, I remember people saying, how can you fight while you're in Beirut and people are demonstrating in Tel Aviv? I remember saying that I'm fighting much better when I know that there are people cares about me. They don't let me do or stay there in Beirut as long as the political level. So it was, for me, the fact that on one hand we could fight, on the other hand there was a civilian involvement in what is happening was important. But now I want to talk about Hezbollah. I mean, I talk about the failure of this October 7th. Let's talk about Hezbollah. For 17 years, we were dealing with Hezbollah. We were dealing with it since the 82 war, but really dealing with it was, I count starting from the second Lebanon war in 2006. Yeah, 2006. We changed our way of dealing with Hezbollah. We started planning offensively. I'm talking about Mossad. Everything we have done since then in Lebanon or with Hezbollah was preparing our surprises for the day to come, for the war to come. We were not thinking defensively. We were not preparing operations, a defensive operation. We were preparing to be part of the war. I'm talking about Mossad. So when it reached the beepers at the war with Hezbollah, and when we killed so many Hezbollah leaders, it was part of the preparation that were taking place many years before and many years in advance. So the philosophy of preparing the war with Hezbollah was an offensive one, not like the philosophy of dealing with Hamas in Gaza. In Gaza, we wanted to survive. With Hezbollah, we said when time comes, we'll deal with it in a different way. And part of what you had seen in the beginning of the war with the beepers and the walkie-talkies and other surprises that were prepared there, it was part of this philosophy, part of this strategy. And by the way, I connect it directly to Dagan. He started with it, and we got the real results at this war. I wanted to say something. Dagan was insisting that as responsible for the front, whether it is Hezbollah and whether it is Iran, we have to do something in order to disrupt their capabilities. We cannot just we have to change the situation. And what we were doing with Hezbollah, we were doing in Iran. In Iran, for so many years, we were dealing with the enriching capabilities and enriching facilities and the let's say the effort to really build an atomic or a nuclear warhead. For so many years, we were preparing these operations in order to disrupt their capabilities and in order to finish it. So when it came to the Lavi, came to the operation of destroying these facilities, we were in a completely different situation. And as I said about exactly the same philosophy that served us with Hezbollah, the offensive philosophy, the offensive preparation, the surprise that were meant to help IDF to destroy their capabilities, serve us in Hezbollah or in Lebanon and serve us in the same way in Iran. Iran was Mossad first priority for years. But it wasn't the first priority of all the Israelis' security organizations. I remind you that 2015, there was President Obama ran for the JCPOA, which enabled us that time to move part of the resources of the Israeli security establishment to other priorities. For the Mossad, the JCPOA didn't change anything. We continue to focus on Iran. And I'm talking about 2015. But in the same time that we were focusing on the Iranian capabilities, IDF changed its priorities completely. So while we were running to destroy the JCPOA, to bring the archive, to prove to anybody or to everybody that this agreement is lousy, the IDF was building on that same agreement, the JCPOA, in order to move its priorities to Hezbollah. So for several years, till the government of Bennett and Lapid were established, the army was really or was almost doing nothing about Iran. And I'm talking about 2015 till 2020, something like that. And then when Bennett came to power and became the prime minister for a short period, he said, okay, now when the Iranians are out of the JCPOA, the Americans are out of the JCPOA, what are we doing next? What are we going to prepare just in case that the Iranian will run for the ball? And he had discovered that only the Mossad will continue focusing on Iran, while the army changed its priorities. And the same, let's say, directive from the same prime minister, on one hand, go ahead, destroy the JCPOA. The same time, he let the army go ahead, move to other priorities. Bennett came, he said, it's impossible. Let's move to the Iranian, let's put the priority on Iran as well. And again, he moved the resources to that direction. And what you have seen in the Lavi, in the campaign against the Iranian missile and Iranian nuclear facilities, was the dramatic change that Bennett, as a prime minister, was doing in 2021. So when you ask me about how come we were in the October 7th so much surprised and failed in such a way, and the same year we have succeeded so dramatically with Hezbollah and Iran. I think part of the reason for that I explained just now. Probably you'll ask me what's next, Dubi. We have time to talk about what's next?
Yes, we have time to talk about what's next. It's going to be the last chapter of your testimony. But I just would like to add to what you have said before. The policy adopted by Netanyahu's government since 2009 and following, as you rightly said, is to consider Hamas as a bitter enemy, but at the same time as a political asset. And it was a political asset because that was the main guarantee that a Palestinian statehood will be impossible. The supporters of this idea, who consider the Palestinian statehood as the worst possible development, was that a two-state solution is impossible because now we are in a situation of a three-state solution. Namely, as long Palestine is divided between Gaza and the West Bank, as I said, Palestinian independence is out of question. And for these people and for Netanyahu's government, that was the overriding political consideration. And this is one of the reasons that they went along with existing of Hamas, though it was clear for everybody that this is our worst enemy. But allow me now to move to the last topic of our conversation, which is what next? What's going to happen? Or what your account of what should happen?
So, although I'm not a prophet, but I want to say what I understand already. The first thing, while trying to discuss what will happen next, is to understand that there will be no total victory. Nothing like that will happen in Gaza. Nothing like that will happen with Hezbollah or with Iran. There is nothing like that can be that we can afford. On the other hand, we cannot afford going back to the place we have been in the October 6th, night before the catastrophe. So understanding that there won't be a total victory, we won't be able to kill the last Hamas fighter or terrorist, and same with Hezbollah in Iran, we have to think about different solutions. This is one point, no total victory. The second point, there won't be any more containment policy. And this is something we've learned in the worst way on October 7th. The fact that we are ready to accept these strategic missiles with Hezbollah or in Lebanon, this huge arsenal of strategic missiles in Iran, and to get Hamas build or dig all the Gaza Strip and build such an army 5 kilometers from our kibbutzim and moshavim, this won't happen again, I believe, at least in the next coming years. We were thinking like that after 73, Yom Kippur, and 50 years passed, and we were again in the same position, same situation, unfortunately. But as I see today, I see the political levels, I see the army, I see the Mossad and Shabak. We won't accept this containment policy. And what you see today in Lebanon, that we destroy every Radwan activist whenever we have the chance. We bomb them, we kill them, even though there is an agreement now, kind of ceasefire, but we continue to kill them. I think it will be the same in all fronts. We won't accept in Iran rebuilding let's say, the infrastructure that we have already destroyed in such an impressive way. And of course, we won't accept that in Gaza. And there is the third point which we have to consider or to take into consideration while trying to understand what will happen next, is the fact that today our strategic dependence on the USA is something that is stronger and deeper and harder, I think, than ever. I remember only one period, it was the beginning of the war of 73, that we were dependent on the United States in the same way. I mean, the situation we arrived today, not just the first days of the war, but even today, that we are dependent on the wish and desire and the strategic plan of the United States in order to move kind of a platoon into Gaza today. You need the okay from the Americans. I don't remember a situation like that before. And I think it will affect the way we are taking decisions, strategic decisions, in all fronts, not just in Gaza, also in Lebanon, also with Iran. Means we are no longer independent in that sense. And I remind you that for years, Israel insisted, even though we got the support, the strategic support from the Americans with money, strategic support in the UN, even though we insist on doing everything by ourselves and taking the decision, at least the tactical decisions, by ourselves. Today, it's not the same. And in any step forward, any move forward, any strategic level that we'll reach, we'll have to take into consideration the fact that we are dependent, or our dependence on the USA is stronger than ever. But I think there are three main issues that will happen next that will be necessary in order to move forward and to try and move out from this let's say deep hole that we fell into. The first one would be to build a much bigger army. To build a much bigger army will require many soldiers, will require some sociological changes in Israel. And I think most of you are aware of what is happening these days while trying to recruit the Haredim community and others, but mainly the Haredim. So we'll need a bigger army. Either we'll do it that way, or we'll have to live according to our resources. If we don't have the Haredim or a new community that will be recruited to the army, we won't be able to maintain the level of security that we are up to. Second, we'll have to prepare a new set of surprises. Unfortunately, in this war, we use most of our surprises that were prepared for years, whether they were technological, operational, and so on. And we have to invest the money, resources, time, technologies in order to prepare the new ones. We need the time for that. And I think this will be a main effort of the decision maker. And the third, and the most important one, will have to seek for political solutions in both fronts, whether it is Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran, and Gaza. We'll have to seek for political agreements, political treaties, while involving the Arab countries around us, the Sunni countries around us, and the United States as a major partner. Without these three issues, building a bigger army, preparing a new set of offensive, and going to new treaties, new agreements involving the Arab around us, we'll have a big problem or a big challenge to move forward.
Thank you, Udi, for this exceptionally interesting message that you had delivered. And now I will hand over the microphone to Keith, and we will open the session for a few questions from our friends around the world.
Thank you, Dubi, and thank you, Udi, so much for a for a deep and a very thoughtful and absolutely remarkable conversation. I just want to say in advance, given the depth of the expertise to our friends around the world, I apologize. We'll probably go a few minutes late. I invite you to stick with us, but we absolutely want to get to some of the intriguing questions. And I'm going to start the first one, Udi. Several people asked a version of this same question. With Syria continuing to evolve politically and militarily, what elements of the situation there are of most concern to Israel's intelligence community?
Right, I'll say about Syria. Syria, I didn't mention Syria along my discussion, but Syria was also an opportunity. The fact that we were able to strike Iran in that way after so many years of preparation, Syria gave us the real opportunity, the real corridor to go to Iran. Without the Syrian collapse or the Syrian regime collapse, it could be much, much, much harder. This is for the opportunity there. Syrian, the new regime there, which I'm not sure there's someone that can really characterize exactly that kind of jihadic regime or changing regime. I think it will be a challenge for the decision makers, not just for the army or operational, but what can they do with this opportunity? Whether it is an opportunity or a threat or both. And I think in Syria, at least as far as I can understand, the political decision makers today in Israel and the military and the security organization, they see it on one hand as a threat, and we have to put or to invest resources there, and the resources are invested. And when I said that we need a bigger army, it's because we need in this quiet frontier or quiet frontier that I remember in my time as a soldier or as an officer, we didn't spend much in order to keep that front quiet because it was so quiet and it was so stable that we consider it as a guarantee quiet or a guarantee peaceful front. Today, you don't know what you're going to get there. And I think it will be a big challenge, but there is an opportunity. And hopefully, the Israeli government will know how to use it. I think the Americans want to get the first prize or the first success there. And I think it will be easier than in Gaza.
Wonderful. Udi, thank you so much for a very thoughtful response to that question. I'm going to bring this to a close. We're nearing our time. I just want to say that your insight and experience is absolutely amazing. We've benefited from it tremendously today, and conversations like this highlight the essential role of the University of Haifa, advancing national security scholarship, strengthening the communities in the North, and supporting a diverse student body that really reflects the future of Israel. I'll say to the folks joining us from around the world, if you'd like to support this work, please visit afuh.org/donate. Please know that your partnership truly makes a difference. And I again want to thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next AFUH program. Thank you so much, friends. Thank you, Udi. Thank you, Dubi.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And בשורות טובות.
בשורות טובות לכולם.
תודה.